My wife, my co-president, is on the background helping. So we have a good one today. I'm sure you are here because of the sensitivity of this topic, trauma and addiction, the intersection between trauma and addiction. Um, a lot of roles that they play, a lot of things that happen there during childhood that continues throughout our life. A lot of them. I'm going to talk about a study that kind of summarizes this. I will talk about primary practical experiences that I'm going to pick from my practice. I will also talk about how this affects addiction in in particular. Obviously, childhood traumas affect all kinds of mental health and mental illness. We're going to connect it to addiction primarily today because that's what this topic is talking about. A lot of us are wondering where this is coming from. I have been involved or associated with addiction treatment for the last 10 years. So it's from just mentoring those who are dealing with addiction to doing internship in addiction recovery place to working in a psychiatric setting, psychiatric hospital, to actually having clients who are suffering from addiction. We have had a lot of it. I did not set out to be a substance abuse or addiction counselor. No. That wasn't my initial goal. My when I went to do grad school for counseling, it was for marriage and family counseling. That's really what their passion was. That's what I went to study. Because we're already doing it as a ministry, we decided to go and get a secular certification and license for that. And then one thing led to the other. We realized that marriage is done by people who are in marriage, and things that happen to those people happen to marriage. If they are suffering from addiction, it affects marriage. If they are grieving, it affects marriage. Whatever is going with those people affects marriage and family. That's how I end up getting immersed in substance and counseling, and then grief and trauma and all, because the central interest that we have in TIFA is marriage and family, and these things affect.
Unmute yourself. Unmute. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Okay. Sorry about that. We had to mute everybody, and then I was also muted. So I had to ask for permission to unmute me. So going back, I'm not even sure where I stopped. Going back in 1995, Kaiser Permanente commissioned a study that lasted for 2 years between 1995 and 1997. And they were exploring the effect of adverse childhood, effect of trauma on adverse childhood experiences, or effect of adverse childhood experiences on all kinds of things. They were looking at how does it affect children when they grow up. And they came up with 10 points, 10 categories of where things that happened when we were children, how it affects us later. One of them was children that suffered from physical abuse. It affects them when they grow up. Another one was sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse I mentioned, mental illness, divorces, substance abuse, violence against mother. I saw that. In other words, violence against mom. I don't know why they don't have violence against that, but I guess I have an idea. Children are attached to their mom. Mom is the primary caregiver for in most of the cases. So whatever happens to mom also end up affecting the kids. And this one is the one that I knew before, that having relatives who were either incarcerated or spent time in jail affects children. There was a study that I read many years ago that children of those who went to prison, who were incarcerated, end up having generations of criminals, generations of dropout from schools, generations of failed marriages, generations of addiction and repeated, all those kind of things affect their offsprings. So this study was done, and it was pointed out that these points that I mentioned, those are the childhood adverse experiences that affect children when they grow up. I'm going to share a story with us that may connect these things before I tell you the impact. Back in 2008 or 2008, I had a young man who I had to assess. And what was happening with this young man is that he had been to prison twice. He had also been to drug rehabilitation 3 times. When I met him, it was his 4th one. He had had 3 failed marriages. The one he was in was the last one, and that one was already at the divorce level. What other thing had he suffered? A lot of things. He couldn't keep a job. He's had businesses that were lost, and he was just 40-something. All these things had happened to him, the imprisonment, the loss of job, the rehabilitation, before he turned 44. And when I met him, the thing that got my interest was his self-esteem was so low that if he was around the other inmates or the other patients and something was done, he would say it's him that did it. It's not him, but he will claim that he did it to save the other people from punishment. So if something was done, he had no idea who did it. He would say, yeah, I did it. So as I started reviewing or assessing him, he started telling me his life. This young man was born among 4 children of his mom, but he was the only child of his dad. His dad was in prison. His mom had the other 3 children with 2 men. One man had 1 child and another man had 2 children. So this woman had children from 3 different men. Unfortunately for him, his dad was in prison. So the other children were taken care of by their dad, their fathers. He was the only one whose dad was not involved, whose dad was not coming. So he told me a story that happened when he was 8 years old. He said, I still remember that till tomorrow. And whenever I remember it, I cry. He said when he was 8 years old, one of his siblings' dad was taken these children to Disney World. And they were promised that they were going to Disney World in December. They were told that they have to increase their grade, they have to do well in school. That was the price for going to Disney World. So he said he didn't know what to say. He knew it wasn't his dad. He knew they do their own thing, but he wanted to go to Disney World. So he eventually summoned up courage and talked to this man and said, if I do well in school, would I go too? The man said, yeah, you'll go. If you just have to raise your grade, make A's, you'll go. So he said from then onward, from January till May, he was working to improve his grade. He wasn't doing well in school before then, but from then onwards, his focus was, if I can improve my grade, I'm gonna go. So he worked very hard. He said out of 4 classes that he was taking, he made A's in 3, but he made a C in 1. So he kind of consoled himself. He said, well, since I made 3 A's, I'll go. He also consoled himself because his siblings, who were the children of that man, didn't make A's. So they did poorly, more than him. So he was focused on going. He said on the day that they were going to California, Disney World, that day he remembers packing his stuff at night, because he said he hid to pack his stuff because everybody was excited. He couldn't get excited. He wasn't sure if he was going or not. And then he packed his stuff, hid it under the bed, and then the man came with the station wagon to pick up the children. And then he summoned up courage, went to the man and said, am I going to? And the man looked at him and said, no, you didn't make A's. You only made 3 A's. You can't go. And that was what broke this man. He's still, up until the time that I talked to him, he still remembers the kids, the other 2 children in a station wagon waving at him. And him, he still remembers sitting and watching the station wagon drive off. And from then onward, he said he became a different person. He started having nightmares. He started even peeing in his at night. All kinds of things was let loose by that singular experience. That's what we call trauma. That's the dysfunction of the family that affects the children. And by the time I met this guy, as I said, he had relapsed from all kinds of drugs. He couldn't keep away. He was only good when he was in rehab. He had spent over 4 years in rehabilitation, still wasn't working. That's what childhood trauma and experiences do to people. Now, there are so many effects of that. It could be depression. It could be instability. It could be someone not keeping a good relationship. You go from one to the other. Those are all things that happen because of childhood, the adverse effects of childhood experiences. So the question that we often get, and this comes up, is it not better for a mom or for a mother or father who is in a domestic violent situation to get out with the children and save them from experiencing the violence that dad or mom perpetuates on her? That argument has been made. That's well and good. But if you look at it, even when you leave, the children still suffer some adverse effect because of the divorce. Now they only have one mom. So there are negative effects one way or the other. So let me talk about some of the impact of childhood trauma. One of them is brain development, smaller brain. The children grow up with having smaller brain, less efficient processing. That was one of the things that this guy was suffering from. He couldn't make decisions. He couldn't process things well. He was always second-guessing himself, so unsure of himself because of what happened when he was a child. Impaired stress response, can't handle stress. I just had a patient last week whose problem was she at 19 has had 4 jobs. Whenever things starts getting hard, he'll quit. And his parents were wondering, what's going on with this child? He will get a job, he loves the job, but as soon as he has one problem from the job, he will just turn in his resignation. Before they even know it, he's quit, he's gone. Same thing with school. He's in school. As soon as there is stress from school, he will drop out. He'll drop a class. He will drop this, drop that, just keeps running. And then when he came, when I was assessing her last week, or she, when I was assessing her last week, I asked her, why do you drop all these classes? Why do you quit all these jobs? That's some concern that your parents have expressed. And she said to me, she said, I just can't handle stress. I just cannot deal with stress. So that's one of the things, impaired stress response. Changes in gene expression, they cannot communicate. So those, as far as the brain. Now, let's talk about the behavior. Poor regulation. In other words, they don't know how to manage sadness, don't know how to go from sadness to happiness or remain in the middle. They cannot regulate their emotion. They have difficulty regulating feeling. They are up and they are down. They are either up, or down, down. There's no middle ground. Middle ground is uncomfortable for them. Social withdrawal. They are socially impaired. They're likely not to have friends, or if they have friends, they may play the aggressor in the relationship, or they play the victim in the relationship. Nothing stable. Social impairment. They have difficulty socializing as you and I will do. They are often aggressive. Because of the low self-esteem, they borrow things, and when they explode, you're wondering, is it this thing that this person is reacting to? No, it's not. They've been bottling things, enduring things for weeks, for years, for months, and now all things have added up. So they are not reacting to what's happening now. They are reacting to what has been happening that you've forgotten, that it's in their mind. They take risk and illegal activities. They act out sexually. Sexually, they act out. Because again, maybe for some, it's just because you have low self-esteem. You have no value for yourself. So you give it out to everybody and anybody. And perhaps sometimes they use sex to seek for favor and approval. So you're going to get a lot of sexual acting out for kids. They start sexual activities very early. And when they get into it, they're really promiscuous. They're not selective in who they engage in sex with. It's any and everybody, because for them, it's not about sex. It's more about other things. Either they are seeking for approval, they're seeking for people to like them. They think that maybe perhaps I have just one thing that people want. So they use that thing to my favor. So sexually acting out, adolescent pregnancy, a lot of teen pregnancy. Again, sex leads to pregnancy and all that. The big one, which is where we're going, drug and alcohol use and misuse. That's the behavior part. We go to the mental health effect of trauma. They have depression, they have anxiety, negative self-image, which leads to low self-esteem. I've talked about that. They have PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome. They are likely to engage in suicidal thoughts. So these are all because of childhood experiences, adverse childhood experiences, traumatic things that happened when they were children. Remember the 10 that I itemized? The physical abuse, the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse, the mental abuse, the family dysfunction. All those things add up to reflect on who we are, on who we eventually become. Relationship, they have attachment problems. They're either when they get in, they hold on fast, they don't want to let go, even when the relationship is not working. Even when they are the victim in it, there is fear of letting go. It could be because of early attachment issues as a child. Now you're wondering, mom abandoned me, dad abandoned me, I won't let this one abandon me. So they have attachment issues, poor understanding of social interactions. they really can't stabilize how the boundaries of social interaction. So they either give too much or give less. Either they are revealing or they are closed up, guarded or open, so wide open, no boundaries, no healthy boundary. Either they are very rigid or they are porous. So relationship-wise, difficulty forming relationship with peers. When they are younger, they are often loners. They are often loners. They are either bullies, in which case their peers don't want to deal with them, or they are victims, in which case their peers don't also respect them. They are not just in the middle. You're going to have that. Problems through romantic relationship. I've already talked about sexual promiscuity. In sexual relation, in a romantic relationship, they also don't value themselves. So because they don't value themselves, they are not valued. So you're going to have this problem, intergenerational cycle of abuse and neglect. So whatever was done to them, they hand it over to their children. I don't know how many of us have read the British poet. I think it's Philip Larkin, Philip, Larkin. I think that's his name. But he wrote a poem that he called "This Be the Verse," and there are some bad choice of words, but you have to realize this poem was written, I think, in 1908. But he talked about what parents hand over to their children. The things we hand over, whatever we receive from our own parents, if we're not processing it, we give them to our children. That's the template we have. Unless we've worked very hard to kind of reorientate ourselves and process it, we are likely to hand those things over to our children. So if your parents trained you by raising their voice, yelling at you, you don't want to be that. But unless you've done something not to be that, that's who you are. So you end up yelling at your children. If your parents were very high-handed and they physically abuse you, they beat you up, if you haven't done something about that experience, you might be growing up and say, I'll never be like my parents. I'll never do what they did to me, to my children. But when push comes to shove, you find yourself doing exactly what your parents did. We are templates of what our parents gave us. That's what Larkin was saying. And I think he's right, that whatever they handed over to us, we hand over to our children, unless we've done something to abuse or disabuse ourselves from it. I've met a lot of people that say, oh, my parents' marriage was dysfunctional. I don't ever want to be like my parents. I don't want to divorce like them. I don't want to fight like them. And before they know it, they're like their parents. They're really doing exactly the same thing that they say they will not do. They are divorcing. Their marriage is very, very dysfunctional because you can only give what you have. That's the template that you have. So you replicate it. So that's what he's talking about here. Intergenerational cycles of abuse and neglect. So we continue to perpetuate the same thing that was done to us, even though we didn't like it. Emotionally, the effect will be difficulty controlling emotion. I've talked about that. Difficulty controlling emotion. Trouble recognizing emotion. Just recognizing I'm sad right now. I'm happy right now. I'm happy because, I'm sad because, I'm lonely because, they can't put their finger on it. Yesterday, I was doing a group therapy, and I told my patients, I said, look, for every emotion, there is a primary and there's a secondary one. If you have anger, there is a secondary reason for the anger. There's a primary reason for the anger. For most people, we just know the primary reason. He took my phone without my permission. That's why I'm angry. I'm going to knock off his teeth. That's the secondary reason why you're reacting. The primary reason is you don't know how to handle people abusing you. You only know that when they take your phone, you go knock their teeth out. That's what you know. So that's what you play. That's the primary reason. You don't like people abusing or disrespecting you. You can't handle that. So whenever that happens, even if the reason is not worth fighting, you go fighting. They took your phone. The phone doesn't work anyway. It's useless. But because it's not about the phone, it's about disrespect. And you, at the back of your mind, you go fighting whenever somebody disrespects you, even when it has no value. So we have that. Trouble recognizing emotion, limited coping skills. That's really the biggest of them. They don't have coping skills, the ability to handle stress, the ability to recognize it and deal with it. I just talked to you about the teenager, the 19-year-old cannot handle stress. Once things start hard, she either quits or she gets depressed. So often she chooses to just give up the whatever it is, including, she's told me, she said, I had a boyfriend and this guy wanted my boyfriend. And my boyfriend was developing interest in the guy. This is a lady that with a guy, but her boyfriend is beginning to like another guy. So she said, instead of fighting, I just left him. I said, follow him. That's who you want to follow. I ended up that relationship. So cannot have very poor coping skills. And because of that, they give up a lot. Increased sensitivity to stress. I've talked about it. Shame and guilt. That's the biggest thing. Shame and guilt often lead to low self-esteem. My client, the guy that I talked about that is 44-year-old, shame and guilt. He can't even make direct eye contact. Very, very low self-esteem, shame and guilt. He never felt like he was qualified. Excessive worrying. They worry a lot. Hopelessness, feeling of hopelessness. They really can't see the future with any hope. Feeling of helplessness and lack of efficacy. Even the things that they are good at, they don't have the confidence that they are good. That's how somebody has low self-esteem. People are saying you're beautiful, but I don't think they are beautiful. You can't convince them that they are pretty, because in their eyes, it doesn't add up. They don't feel it, so it's not it. So that's physical health. Let's talk about physical health, and then I'll talk about cognition. We'll stop here because of our time. Physical health, they have problems sleeping. They usually have sleep disorder. They have problems eating well. Either they eat too much or eat a little. They have poor immune system functioning. Obviously, they also have poor cardiovascular, they are prone to cardiovascular disease. Ultimately, when you combine all these things, it's short lifespan, shorter lifespan. Cognition, they have impaired readiness to learn. It's difficult for them to focus. It's difficult for them to be motivated. It's difficult. They have impairedness in readiness to learn. They have difficulty solving problems. I've talked about that. They have, usually when they are growing up, they have language delays. Those kids have language delays, problem with concentration, and this leads to poor academic performance. That's the one we see mostly. We see mostly the poor academic performance because there is a matrix. He's in school. If you make, say, an A, you know. If you make C, you know. If you make D, you know. So there's a matrix for that. The other deficiencies, there's no metrics for measuring emotional stability. Nobody measures that, so we don't see that a whole lot. But all these indices, all these things are how the child who has experienced adverse childhood experiences, which are traumas, who have experienced it, they manifest all these things. And for the purposes of our addiction course or addiction focus, they become addicts, because all these things are troubled person. This is a troubled person. They cannot handle themselves. They can't handle outside. They don't like themselves. They don't feel value in themselves. They don't feel happy in themselves. They can't handle stress. They can't handle problem solving. They can't deal with life. So what do? They're looking for escape. They have poor coping skills. So they choose coping skills that are readily available. They want to escape from their reality. Drug and alcohol is often the way to go. So you see the intersection between the things that happen to people in their childhood and the things that are happening to them in their adulthood. when we do psychosocial assessment, which is really to look at the whole person from childhood, at the age of 9, what were you doing? What did your parents do? How was your relationship with your siblings like? Did you live with one parent or two parents? When we do the whole assessment, you begin to see pattern. You begin to see pattern of what's reflecting in that 50-year-old man. You see what happened at age 10, age 20, the sexual abuse that happened that hasn't been processed. That's why this person is drinking. They don't feel like they are valued. They still feel dirty because someone raped her when she was 10, when she was 20. She has no respect for her body because someone debased her. Someone really put it on her. And then that is in the mind of, I am damaged. I'm not good. So if I'm not good, anyone can have me. So you see that sexual promiscuity. Same thing with alcohol. I'm not good. So why do I need to preserve this body? I need to manage me. I need to get away from this. So they take all kinds of drugs, sometimes to just function socially. I've had a lot of clients who tell me that they only take drugs. They only started taking drugs to socialize. In other words, they're going to party. They don't feel like they can talk or socialize without taking something. They take something to go to party and function normally. At least they think it's normally. And from there, they become addicted to that substance. And usually they try one, it works for a while, but they increase to another one when it stops working. Same thing with alcohol. Someone that is an alcoholic starts from maybe 1, 2, 3 glasses, 2, 3 shots, and they are intoxicated. And then after a while, that doesn't work, they increase it. After a while, alcohol doesn't work, they go to marijuana. That doesn't work, they go to cocaine. That doesn't work, they go to heroin. That doesn't work, they keep trying different kinds to get the same result, to get a high. And that's how people become multiple users. They become multiple users. This was me growing up, but I thank God. Thank you. Yeah. So if you're a parent here, and that's why in TINFA, we advocate stay for the sake of the children. Stay. And just divorce is not an option. It creates more challenges. It solves one problem. The only problem it solves is gives you distance from the person. That's it. But mentally, you're still thinking about that. So it creates more problems. Stay. When the children are raised, when they are stable, 17, 18, 19, 20, you can go wherever you want. Otherwise, you're handing to them, I wouldn't say that, more of limited functionality. They're going to be dealing with things. Now, even those who are still staying together, when you live in a very violent, quarrelsome, conflict-ridden relationship, think about what you're doing to those children. Think about that. Think about them for a minute. It's not about you. It's not about you. Some of the kids that are drug addicts and alcoholics, it's to escape the violence and the dysfunction at home. They're looking for escape from what's going on at home between mom and dad. That's what they're looking for. Some of the kids that get sexually active, they're looking for love because love is not at home. They can't find it. Nobody is saying that. Nobody's loving them. Nobody's expressing it. Nobody's showing it. So anyway, our time is fast gone. I'll stop here. If you are interested in this topic, this subject, we offer a 14-week course. If you're hearing it for the first time, the last day of registration is January 31st. So you're still in course to register for that course. We offer payment plans, a lot of money, but you have 5 months, 5 whole months to pay it. Look, let me tell you, the same course, the same curriculum that we are offering in that course, the same letters, we offer it. That course is offered here anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 here in the US. The same thing, but we are offering it for less than $1,000. So it's not about money. It is because there is need for mental health practitioners in Africa. The psychiatrists are not enough. They can't be anywhere. We don't have enough. We don't even have enough in the US. Talk about Africa. So if your community is lacking in those things, that's why we are doing this course. You can still join us. You can pay 1/4 of that. You can pay 25% every month. By May, April, you've paid all of it and you've gained that experience. It's not enough. What I'm doing in 30 minutes is not really enough. You can see how I'm going. I did not go deep into the study because I don't have that time. I did not go into the implication. I just talked about the effects that it has. We just talked about that. But we'll talk about this again next week. Join me back, come back. Let's talk about it again. Trauma and addiction, childhood trauma and addiction. We will explore more how it plays out.